I got a letter from my dead wife. Luke held the letter with shaky hands, trying hard to process what he was seeing. No, it can't be, he thought, jumping from disbelief to anger. He could not settle his mind on what the situation was. If this wasn't a prank, then the other option was impossible. His eyes scanned over the words, paying close attention to the handwriting. It was most definitely his wife, Susannah's handwriting. But how could that be? She'd been dead for 5 years. He took time to investigate the envelope, which was as ordinary as they come. There was no return address, just his written on the center. If it really was Susannah, he wasn't sure whether to be elated or deeply saddened. Yet, like emotions can sometimes be, it was both. Tears welled up as he thought on the words she used, and realized that it sounded just like her. It was obvious from the letter that she was sad, expressing how much she'd missed him and wished they could be together again. The more Luke thought about it, he decided that he would burn the letter. He'd gotten so far in grieving and was almost ready to move on. This would just pull him back into a depression again. So with a heavy heart, he started a fire and whispered his goodbyes to his wife. He poked the letter and fire around until nothing was left but ash. Before long, the warmth from the fire soothed him, and he fell asleep in his chair. The next day, Luke went about his routine, and before he knew it, he was home from work. As he walked into the door, he sorted the junk mail from the rest, and that was when he saw it. Another letter? No! He threw it on the dining room table and stood unmoving, watching the envelope as if he expected it to do something. Then he sat and stared at it. Over time, curiosity won over trepidation. Unfolding the letter, he read, "Luke, this has been so hard for me to be away from you. I just really need to speak to you again. It's taken time, but I'm in a better place now than I was. Even then, I want to hear from you one last time. Even if we can't embrace again, we can still talk, can't we? It's okay if you don't want to write back because it's too difficult. I'll understand. But can you try, at least once for me? I will await your consideration. Yours forever, Susannah." Exhaling slowly, Luke tried to wrap his head around it all. Perhaps he was losing his mind and should talk to someone. Talk to someone, he said aloud. There was a simple way to settle his mind on this supernatural matter, so he made the phone call. The next day, his brother came over and they engaged in small talk. "So, what is this you invited me over for? Sounded important." "Yes, this is going to sound weird, but hear me out." Luke laid the envelope on the table in front of his brother. "This showed up in my mailbox yesterday. There was one before it, and I burned it." "Are you being blackmailed?" No, it's unbelievable though. It's a letter." "Okay, so what?" "From Susannah." His brother eyed him suspiciously, looking for any sign of deception. "From Susannah?" "Yes, it's in her handwriting. It's the same way she speaks. I thought it was a horrible prank and I was so angry, but it has to be her. Just read it, please." With caution and a dark curiosity, his brother picked up the letter and began to skim over the page. After a couple of seconds, he gave Luke a sidelong glance. "What is this you're trying to pull?" "What? I'm not trying to—" "Luke, it's blank, come on. This some stupid joke? About your deceased wife, no less? Have you lost it completely?" "No, look at me. There is writing on it. I've been doing great. That's why it's so shocking to me, because I'm not sad. I'm not looking for her. It just came to me out of the blue." "Well, if you're not sad, then you're crazy. It's just a blank piece of paper." The brother stood up and stormed out of the house. "And don't talk about this to me again. It's a waste of my time and energy." Luke stood at the front door, dumbfounded. He glanced at the paper and still saw the words scrawled across the page. "So only I can see it. Something utterly strange is going on here." Not knowing what else to do, he sat in front of the fire and thought the situation over. He grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, then took to writing. 10 minutes later, he finished his response to Susannah and put it in the mailbox with the flag raised. Now, time was all he needed. A week later, Luke no longer expected anything back. In vain hopes, he checked his mailbox every day, but nothing came. Perhaps his letter never reached Susannah, or that she had given up on him and stopped writing. Or perhaps he had made up everything in his head and he was too crazy to know something was wrong with him. Then, the letter came. Ripping open the letter, he quickly purveyed the contents and shouted in victory. They were able to reach each other after all, as she responded to everything he mentioned in his letter. Luke had stumbled upon something marvelous. Melancholy indeed, but also marvelous. So he wrote back, excited to write to his beloved once more and talk about life. This continued for some time, but he never mentioned any of it to his family. Since his brother was mad enough over the whole thing, he acted as if it never happened. All things concerned, Luke was quite happy. Until one day, the letters stopped. Luke wrote back every day since, hoping it would somehow stir a reaction, but it never did. In fact, the letters returned to him despite not listing a return address. It wasn't a fluke. The letters just weren't getting to Susannah anymore. So he waited and waited. An unknown amount of time went by, and Luke was awakened by a knock at the door. He was instantly intrigued, as no came to see him at this hour. In fact, he had fallen asleep in front of the fire again, and it was quite late. He called out for whoever it was, but they only responded with more knocking. It felt very ominous, but he was prepared for any intruders with a Louisville slugger. There was no way for him to get a clear view of his doorstep, so he cracked the door open just enough to get a clear view. When he saw who it was, he dropped the bat in astonishment and opened his door. Two women sat together on a front porch, gazing out across the street as they sipped tea and conversed. Most would imagine a tea talk during sunny weather, but these two loved the opposite even more. The rain was coming down, creating a very interesting atmosphere along with a pleasant ping on the roof. "That's odd," the first woman said. "What's that?" "My neighbor across the street. She hasn't been outside today." "Well, that's not strange. The weather's terrible." "Not for her. I always see her checking her mailbox, even after the postman's come." "Really? Why would she come out again after she's collected her mail?" The first woman got a funny look, and the second knew something was amiss. "What? Why are you looking that way?" "That woman, her name is Susannah. I want to tell you something about her, but do not repeat it." "Oh, you don't need to." "I really mean it. She's been a good friend of mine, and we both know you have a big mouth. So please, don't mention this to anyone. I promise. Especially if it would upset you that much." "Okay." So Susannah told me that she's been going to therapy ever since her husband passed. To help her cope, the psychiatrist suggested that she write a letter to her husband telling him anything that she wanted. But Susannah didn't stop there. She actually put the letter in her mailbox. Since then, she's been receiving letters back from her husband. I was immediately concerned. Her husband has been dead for 5 years. I'm afraid she's still struck with grief. My God, the poor thing. You never stop grieving, they say. I couldn't believe it, of course. I didn't want to play to any delusion she may have, so I told her to show me the letter. And she did. It was just a blank piece of paper. Oh, do you think she's lost it? Maybe, I don't know. She's been feeling under the weather recently, so maybe that's got something to do with it. Her lungs haven't been the same since the fire. What fire? Don't you remember? Her husband died alongside his brother from a house fire. He fell asleep in his favorite chair by the fireplace, and an ember ignited the rug. She was the only one who survived. Oh, I remember now. That was so horrible. It was. Come to think of it, maybe I should go check on her. I'm starting to think something might be wrong.